listen.
Perfect union. A union that constantly requires reform and rededication. And yes, the protest from voices that are mistreated, ignored, left out, or left behind. But it is a union worth fighting for. And that's why I'm running for president. In addition to the Bible, the president might also want to open the U.S. Constitution once in a while. If he did, he'd find a thing called the First Amendment. And what it says in the beginning, it says, the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition their government for redress of grievances. That's kind of an essential notion built into this country. Mr. President, that's America. That's America. No horses rising up on their hind legs to push back peaceful protest. Not using the American military to move against the American people. This is a nation of values. Our freedom to speak is a cherished knowledge that lives inside every American almost from the time you're a kid. We're going to allow any president to quiet our voice. We won't let those who see this as an opportunity to sow chaos throw up a smokescreen to distract us from very real and legitimate grievances at the heart of these protests. We can't leave this moment. We can't leave this moment thinking that we can once again turn away and do nothing. We can't do that this time. We just can't. The moment has come for our nation to deal with systemic racism, to deal with the growing economic inequity that exists in our nation, to deal with the denial of the promise of this nation, made to so many. You know, I've said from the outset of this election that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. And we are in the battle for the soul of this nation. What we believe, and maybe most importantly, who we want to be, it's all at stake. That's truer today than it's ever been, at least in my lifetime. And it's this urgency, it's in this urgency, we can find a path forward. Now, the history of this nation teaches us that in some of our darkest moments of despair, we've made some of our greatest progress. Some of our darkest moments. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments followed the Civil War. The greatest economic growth in world history grew out of the Great Depression. Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 65 came in the tracks of Bull Connor's vicious dogs. To paraphrase Reverend Barber, it's the morning where we find hope. It's in the morning where we find hope when we mourn. But it's going to take more than talk. We've had talk before. We've had protests before. We've got to now vow to make this at least an era of action and reverse the systemic racism with a long overdue concrete changes. The action will not be completed in the first 100 days of my presidency if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, or even in my entire term. It's going to take the work of a generation. But if this agenda will take time to complete, it should not wait for the first 100 days of my presidency to get started. A down payment on what is long overdue should come now, should come immediately.
What it's going to take is for the wealthy and the rich, those who have panhandled off of the system in the past 25 or 30 years, that has now got fat pocketbooks, nice cars, nice homes, nice bank accounts. What it's going to take is for those people to surrender and to give in with this power struggle and allow for the millenniums to stand up and be that in which what they're supposed to be. if we're ever going to see peace in utopia, true peace, biblical Bible peace that it talks about, we're going to have to see a revival. We're going to have to see a revolution. And this revolution isn't going to be based upon one particular person's ideology pertaining to their deep pockets versus another. The system is broken. Whenever you go to showing flashpoints in these people's eyes that we're now $25 trillion upside down and over 2.3 million incarcerated people in jail, locally, state, federal, here in America. And whenever you have all the corruption pertaining to the cash underground movement that has been going on for quite some times now, pertaining to how people has basically just panhandled off of the system because of the word cash. Whenever you have this much corruption going on, not only in politics, but also in your churches and in our work ethics, you have a system that has become tainted. And the only way to fix the problem is to fix the system. The only way to fix the system is to rehaul the system. Rehaul the system, because the system is the thing that is helping to cause this problem towards people standing up, feeling this type of hate and feeling this type of remorse that has been going on in their lives for quite some times now. Whenever you have almost 40 million people that all of a sudden you laid off because of the pandemic problem, that now can't make a home payment or a rent payment, can't make a car payment and other payments, they don't have insurance, they feel like that their life is at doom. These are the same people 3 months ago, before the pandemic ever set in, was already struggling towards not being able to make a house payment or a car payment if there was a dire emergency that set into their lives, such as a motor being blown up in their automobile, or somebody getting sick, or even a flat tire. Can't everybody fork out $200 and say, here, let's go get a brand new tire? You have people that has been this close to the edge now, way, way before the pandemic ever hit. And now whenever you add the pandemic on the other matters, you have a recipe or a formula of a perfect storm. And that's what's happening right now. So you can get on the TVs and you can preach this and that and that and this, but the bottom line is you got people hurting, and they're hurting right now. Have you not seen all the bread lines where people are farming and going and getting free food? They're not doing that because it's free. They're doing that because that may be the only thing that they got to survive off of. An extra box of goodies. This thing has been in shambles way, way before Donald Trump ever got in power. And now we're seeing the manifestation of it. This is leading to what went on in 1988, whenever a group of people failed to do the right thing, and they thought that they was going to be able to hoodwink, bamboozle, deceive, manipulate God's precious people pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy. That's what this is about. And of course now we're seeing sure enough prophecy coming true towards the last days, that Satan will rise up in great wrath because he realizes that he has been defeated. He has been conquered. The very thing that the evangelical spiritual world started thousands and thousands of years ago, he's finally realizing he is at his doom. Satan, Lucifer, the Antichrist, he is at his doom. And he knows it. So now he's using every type of tool and method and technique that he can towards bringing harm and hardship and chaos to not only the American people, but to the world. To the world, Mr. Biden, to the world. And there's no doubt whenever you have a hotshot in power right now, such as Donald Trump, that's trigger happy, that wants to bring down the American people by using their own military force, you're only adding insult to misery. For surely to God, you can see that, Mr. Biden. This is another example of what I'm talking about. Mr. Biden, he's probably got a lot of good intentions, but look at his age. Can he really relate to the younger generation out there that are struggling with college degrees and struggling with already pre-existing health issues because of what their parents either done or didn't do? Can this man really and truly lead us out of the darkness into the future? To me, it's the same thing as Donald Trump. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. Caught in between a hard place and a rock. How come we don't have somebody in there that can relate to what's going on with these people's lives? They're in the shadows of another generation or another culture. There's no way that these people can relate to what's going on in most people's lives right now. And because of it, we're seeing this uprising. We're seeing this major protesting going on because people are hurt. They want some real answers. And they don't want it a generation from now. They don't want it a presidential election from now. They want it now. We're dealing with a generation of a now generation. And if the wealthy and the rich can't see that, well then maybe they do deserve for major protesting to fall out into their streets to the point that they themselves become damaged while they're living in their little comfort zone, while they're living in their nice homes and driving their nice automobiles and they have their nice bank accounts. Maybe this is the only way to bring down a corrupt system that has already been broken by being $25 trillion in debt. I have been watching this and watching this and watching this since 1988. And I have watched it escalate and get worse and worse and worse. You know, you had Bill Clinton with the Waco and the Oklahoma deal. Before that, you had the Rodney King riots. Then you had 9/11. And then we've had other skirmishes and problems that we've had to look at and shake our head and scratch our noggins and raise our eyebrows about. But now this ordeal. The rich people, the wealthy people, the corrupt people, oh, they would love to settle this down too as well and make false, empty, void promises. But the people, the young people are onto this and they're not going to let it go because there's too much hurt. Too many people have been hurt because of this lies and this corrupt government.
I call on the Congress to act this month on measures that will be the first step in the...
Act this month. Act today. Not this month. Not next month. Not a week from now. But today. We live in a today society, my friend. That's one of the things that me and Mr. Burns have been talking about. Lieutenant Burns out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The difference between the uprisings that happened during the 60s of the civil rights movements, they didn't have the computer back then like they do today. They didn't have internet and social media back then like they do today. Yeah, there was an internet. There was a computer back then, but it wasn't used near as thrivably as it is today. Today, give or take, probably 7 out of 10 people has access to a computer either in their hand or at home, or the automobiles that they drive. We are becoming data programmed to the point that now we live on a day-to-day level, not a month-to-month level, not a generation-to-generation level. We live on a day-to-day level towards people knowing what's going on. That's the reason why the protest is going on out in China, is because they know how other people are supposed to live. And they're not being fed other than the crumbs that falls from the master's table. And they're tired of it too as well. There's major protesting going on all over this countryside because people have awakened. Not next week, not next month, not next president term, but today. Today. We live in a today society. And if the rich and the powerful can't see that, then they're the ones that's dim-witted. They're the ones that's delirious. They're the ones that has smoked too much hash, or snorted too much cocaine, or done too many drugs, or need to be put on drugs. They're the ones that's out of focus with reality, not the rest of the world. The rest of the world is telling you right now how the cow's going to eat the cabbage, and we still do not hear no good leadership coming from our leaders telling us how we're going to reform this system.
This direction. Starting with real police reform, Congressman Jeffries has a bill to outlaw chokeholds. Congress should put it on the president's desk in the next few days. There are other measures to stop transferring weapons of war to police forces, improve oversight and accountability, to create a model use of force standard. That also should be made law this month. No more excuses, no delays. If Mitch McConnell can bring in the United States Senate to confirm Trump's unqualified judicial nominees who will run roughshod over our Constitution now, it's time to pass legislation that will give true meaning to our constitutional promise of equal protection under the law. Looking ahead in the first 100 days of my presidency, I've committed to creating a National Police Oversight Commission.
Listen to this. Listen to these void promises. Listen to these senseless, empty vessels talk. Listen to this. America just got through going through a ringer and watching one of the most corrupt games to be played on the American people that costed, I think, give or take around $100 million in total. From the inquiries to the hearings to the trial, if you want to call it a trial, pertaining to the sham that went on with the president and the Ukrainians. The people went through the ringer on that and watched that unfold right in front of their very eyes towards a unjust, undue Congress that allowed for this hardship to fall upon to the American people. Since that has occurred, we have seen horror after horror after horror on national TV. This is not something that people are imagining. This is not our imaginations running wild. This is the truth. This is the reality of the truth of where we're living at right now. And to think that you're going to make void promises if you become president, I'm going to do this in 100 days. If I become president, I'm going to do that in 100 days. We don't need to hear these speeches any longer. We want reform, and we want it now. And you can tell your leaders that. The president, the vice president, and on down through the sections of the federal government as well as the state governments. We want action, and we want it now, is what the people are crying out in these protests and wanting. And I guarantee you, after this settles back down, in which it will settle down eventually, it could get worse before it gets better, they'll hush it up until the next incident happens on the next digital data device that somebody captures another cop losing his cool and becoming brutal to one of our citizens. And it doesn't matter if it's a black citizen, a white citizen, a Mexican citizen, an Asian citizen, a Russian citizen, a Canadian citizen, a European citizen. It's just a matter of time before we're going to see it again. And we all know this. But we continue to play into these games. You got people that are facing bankruptcy courts, Mr. Biden and Mr. Donald Trump. You got people that don't know if they're going to be able to feed their families tomorrow or not.
I've long believed we need real community policing. We need each and every police department of the country to understand a comprehensive view of their...
Me and David tried to do that out here in Weakley County at 291 Thompson Road. We was trying to take care of some children about at the age of 10, 7, and 4. 3 little kids that was being abused and going through stuff that they shouldn't have had to have been going through. And you see what I got? It all twisted around to the point that I was a stalker because I had good intentions towards wanting to take care of children as a good Samaritan. The country is turned upside down. And it's people like you, and people like Mike Wilson, and people like Tommy Thomas, and other law enforcement career planning politicians that has allowed it to get this way. And then you want to scramble our names? You want to post it in your paper? You're a joke. And the people are standing up to this because they know that they are at their doom. And unless the people take back over the government instead of the wealthy and the corrupt and the powerful, the government is going to continue to waller in its own mauler, just as a hog goes back to its waller.
Undertake a comprehensive review of their hiring, their training, their de-escalation. Some have already done it, some are in the process of doing it. The federal government should give the cities and states the tools and the resources they need to implement reforms. More police officers meet the higher standards of their profession. Most of them do it. All the more reason why bad cops should be dealt with severely and swiftly. We all need to take a hard look at the culture that allows for the senseless tragedies that keep happening. And we need to learn from the cities and the precincts that are getting it right. We know, though, in order to have true American justice, we need economic justice as well. Here, too, there's much to be done. As an immediate step, Congress should act now to rectify racial inequities that allow COVID-19 recovery funds to be diverted from where they live. I'll be setting forth my agenda on economic justice and opportunity in the weeks and months ahead, but it begins with health care. Health care should be a right, not a privilege, and the quickest route to universal coverage in this country is to expand on Obamacare. We could do it, we should do it. But this president, even now, in the midst of a public health crisis with massive unemployment, wants to destroy it. He doesn't care how many millions of Americans will be hurt because he's consumed with this blinding ego when it comes to Barack Obama, President Obama. The president should withdraw his lawsuit to strike down Obamacare, and the Congress should prepare to pass the act I propose to expand Obamacare to millions more so everyone's covered. These last few months, we've seen America's true heroes. Healthcare workers, docs, nurses, delivery truck drivers, grocery store workers. You know, we've come up with a new phrase for them. Essential workers. Essential workers. And we need to do more than praise them. We need to pay them. We need to pay them. Because if it weren't clear before, it's clear now. This country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers and CEOs. It was built by the great American middle class, which was built by unions and our essential workers. You know, I know there's enormous fear and uncertainty and anger in the country. I understand. I know so many Americans are suffering loss of a loved one, suffering economic hardship, wondering, can I feed my family tomorrow? What's going to happen? Suffering under the weight of a generation after generation after generation of hurt inflicted on people of color in black, brown, and Native communities. particular. Like many of you, I know what it means to grieve. My losses are not the same as losses felt by so many. But I know what it feels like when you think you can't go on. I know what it means to have that black hole in your chest where your grief is being sucked into it. Just a few days ago marked the 5th anniversary of my son Bo's passing from cancer. And there are still moments when the pain is so great it feels no different than the day I sat in that bed as he passed away. But I also know that the best way to bear loss and pain is to turn it into that anger and anguish into purpose. And Americans know what our purpose is as a nation.
Well, then give us a chance to do it then.
It has to be guided. It's guided us from the very beginning. You know, it's been reported the day that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, little Yolanda King came home from school in Atlanta and jumped in her daddy's arms and said, "Oh, Daddy," she said, "now we're never going to get our freedom." Her daddy was reassuring, strong, and brave. He said, "No, don't worry, baby. It's going to be okay. It's going to be all right." Amid the violence and fear, Dr. King, he persevered. He was driven by his dream of a nation where justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Well, he didn't do it in this lifetime. He done it in the lifetime to come, pertaining to him being assassinated, Martin Luther King. Yes, his works are still to this day moving on, but they didn't accomplish what he wanted to accomplish during the time that he was living. But now we're at that struggle road again, where what do? Whenever you have a nation that is grieving because of all the sorrow and because of all the collapsation that has happened with our government, do you bring in armed forces to add insult to misery pertaining to a federal military and turn this thing into a militarizing police force? Is that the right answer? Is that the proper way to go? Or is it to allow for people such as myself to have that voice, to be able to tell the people where you messed up at, where you have a bunch of 99%ers that's living in a 1% government that has failed the people. And now you're telling us to turn our heads and have a blinded eye to this again? There's no way that the people are going to turn their heads on this. This generation will stand, and this generation will turn those 1%ers into believers. And if they're not willing to do it voluntarily, they'll be willing to do it involuntarily towards bringing more harm and more destruction up onto the streets. And whenever you have a society that looks upon life to the point that they rather be dead than to live in this entrapment that has befallen upon to them, then is whenever you have a society that will lash out to not only the guilty but also to the innocent. And that's where we are right now, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Biden. We are at the crossroads of a generation that has spoken up and is speaking up by saying enough is enough. And this has went beyond the point of repair to the point of now it's at the point of overhaul. Thank you to my viewers. Good luck to all of us at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your prayers. And good luck to all of us. And once more, as we speak to the whole masses, Good luck to all of us. Shalom.